The forest was silent. The cabin lights flickered, then roared to life like a stage set. Through the window, she saw a little boy, pale, soaked, barefoot, staring back at her. His eyes weren't pleading, they were angry. She lunged outside. But the snow was untouched. No Prince, no boy. Inside, the dining table was set for 5, forks clinking against empty plates. And on her chair, a crayon drawing signed in a handwriting she hadn't seen since the fire. Memory doesn't flicker out, it waits in the dark. The cabin creaked the way old bones do, slow, reluctant, aching with weather. She lit the last match and pressed its flame to the candle's wick, shielding it with her palm. The power had gone out an hour ago. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe it had just blinked off and on, like someone deciding whether to be kind. Outside, snow stitched itself across the trees, quieting the world into something almost holy. She exhaled and watched her breath lift. The frost on the window caught it like a secret. Her boots left no sound on the old wood. Every surface inside the cabin had been cleaned twice over by her hands, out of habit. There was no reason for the dust to keep returning, and yet it did. Just like the scent of burnt pine wood, faint under the layers of lemon soap. She stood at the edge of the kitchen and stared at the chair across from her, the one no one should have touched. A child's crayon drawing sat on the cushion. It was folded in half. A sun, crooked. A woman holding a small hand. A chimney with smoke. The name written at the bottom. Eva. Her hands trembled before her mind did. Eva had been gone 6 years. And that handwriting didn't belong to any child in town. It belonged to the woman who used to braid her daughter's hair and whisper, "You keep that smile, baby, even when they don't." It was her sister's handwriting, but her sister was dead, too. The fire had taken them both. She turned the drawing over. Nothing, just a crease in the paper that reminded her of the scar on her hip, a pale reminder from the day she dragged her own body out of the wreckage barefoot. Lungs full of smoke, carrying no one but guilt. The lights flashed once, then again. She didn't move. From the vent above the old stove, a sound fluttered like laughter caught in a drainpipe. Then came the faintest clink of silverware, the kind you hear just before the soup is served. She walked slowly, one step at a time, no sudden moves. Like the walls might wake. And then the candle flickered, and for a moment, the window reflected 3 people in the room. She turned. There was only one. She stepped toward the attic stairs. Each step whispered back at her. The same creak, the same reply. But when her foot reached the 4th plank, it caught on something soft, muddy prints. Child-sized. Leading up, she didn't follow. Instead, she went back to the living room, opened the cedar chest that still smelled like her father's beard balm, and pulled out the only thing she'd kept from the old house, the melted frame of a photograph, still fused to the corner of the glass. 3 faces, hers, her daughter's, and Anna's, all 3 smiling in sun. A summer that smelled of orange soda and engine oil. But the photo hid something worse. Beneath it was a folded note, slipped in long ago. She hadn't remembered placing it there. The paper had yellowed around the corners, the ink bled with time. Knew she loved the matches more than the music. You should have watched her closer. A shiver climbed her spine. The words were hers. She'd written them once in a grief-struck fury, blaming her sister for the candle left unattended on the rug. But she'd never meant to keep it. She thought she'd burned it. Wind howled outside, but only at the front door. Like something asking permission, she opened the door and stared into the woods. Nothing. Nothing but the sound of snow. Hitting snow. Then she turned back to close the door, and a tiny mitten lay at the threshold. Purple, knitted, frayed at the cuff. Ava's. She pressed it to her chest and swayed on her heels, memory catching in her throat like smoke. Once, long before fire, Anna had stood in this very cabin, before it was inherited, before it was haunted, and had whispered, "You get the kid, I'll get the matches." A joke. But not really. Anna had always loved watching things fall apart, but she also used to cry at musicals. She once gave away her winter coat to a boy outside the gas station who said he was cold. Anna was cruel, but not empty, which made it worse, because people who still feel can still hurt you worse. She sat on the cold floor, wrapped in the ghost of the mitten's warmth. In the wall, the vents sighed again. A song this time, hummed, familiar, Ava's lullaby. Snow is quiet, sleep is near. The tune cut off. She rose without thinking. Walked to the basement door. It hadn't been opened in days. There was no reason to open it now. She opened it. The stairs groaned. Dust swirled. The air smelled of old metal and wet ash on the bottom. Step, another crayon drawing. This one torn. No sun this time. Just the same three figures, one with red around her hands. The chimney now broken in half. She touched the drawing's corner and winced. A tiny shard of glass had pierced the paper's edge. She looked up. On the shelf, a single, humming nightlight plugged into the socket. It shouldn't have worked, not in the outage, but it cast a soft blue glow. The shape of a moon. It had been Ava's. She hadn't packed it. She remembered. She'd forgotten it in the rush. And yet it glowed. She pulled the plug. The light stayed on. Then dimmed. Then blinked. She whispered, to no one, "Anna, why are you doing this?" No reply. Just the faintest trail of muddy water leading away. From the plug, along the baseboards, toward the washer. She followed it. She stopped. The washer door was slightly open. Inside, a small box. She pulled it out. A jewelry box, scorched at the corners. She hadn't seen it since the fire. Inside was the necklace she'd given Anna when they were kids, half a locket. Hers said stay. Anna's had said gone. She'd buried hers. This one was Anna's. It was warm. She stepped back and saw her reflection in the washer door's glass, except the woman staring back wasn't breathing. She slammed it shut, and the light upstairs came on again, bright, all of them. The sound of silverware clinking returned. Clearer now, laughter, louder. She didn't scream. Instead, she walked up the attic. Steps. Each step a prayer. At the top, the door stood open. Inside, just one thing. A mirror on the far wall. And on the mirror, in breath-fogged letters, "If you'd watched me like this, she'd still be here." The candle in her hand flickered violently. Smoke climbed. And then final line. Behind her, the third reflection blinked. There are monsters that wear familiar faces. 7 years ago, the hallway always smelled like lemons. Not real lemons, lemon-scented cleaner, sharp and synthetic. She used to mop the floors after he left, scrubbing harder than necessary. Not because of the dirt, but because of the echoes. The sharp slap of a fork on porcelain. The sting of his silence. The way he watched the kids eat as if they owed him something. She remembered the way he used to stand behind their daughter while she colored, correcting how she held the crayon like it was a weapon. "Fingers closer," he'd whisper. "You're doing it wrong." He never hit them, not the way people imagined. But his voice bruised. His eyes punished. His love came with lockets and conditions. She had one of those lockets still. Found it last week at the bottom of a rusted biscuit tin, buried in the crawl space of the cabin. The fire had twisted it into a warped oval. The photo inside burned. Halfway to ash. Just a little girl's left eye and the curve of a smile. The other half missing. Melted. Gone. She hadn't known it was even still with her. Not until she opened the tin and her fingers bled on the metal edge. The cabin had gone quiet again. Outside, snow whispered against the window like someone rehearsing. An apology they'd never say aloud. She held the locket in her palm, the metal still stained with soot, and stared at the anonymous note resting on the table. Just 5 words, scratched in tight black ink. "You didn't lose them. You gave them away." She read it again, and again. The ink had bled into the table, like it had been there much longer than yesterday. She hadn't told anyone she'd found it. Not the sheriff, not her sister's boy who brought groceries once a week, not even herself until now, when the words kept blooming behind her eyes. In the quiet, she heard it again, the hiss of the gas stove. Even though the knob was off, a memory or a warning. In the kitchen, she reached out, turned the dial once, then back, no sound. No flame, nothing. Still, she unplugged it, just in case. She made tea, though she didn't drink it. Just liked the warmth of the cup in her hands. Like holding a heartbeat. Or pretending she still had one. That night, sleep came in fragments. She woke once to the sound of water running only to find the sink dry. Another time, a whisper. She looked like you. Her hands clenched the blanket like rope. Flashback, his POV, he'd watched her light the candle that night. Her hands trembling. He said nothing. Just watched. He could have warned her. Could have reached out and said, "Not there." Not near the curtains. But he didn't. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he wanted her still. After the children started loving her more than him, something shifted. She used to smile at his stories. Then she started interrupting, correcting, loving too loudly, too freely. He told himself he didn't mean to leave the rag there. Told himself it was a lesson. Told himself love needs fire, or it freezes. Back to present, she stepped into the old nursery. The floor creaked like it was sighing. She hadn't been in here since arriving. The wallpaper stars and moons had peeled in strips like dead skin. Dust hung in the air like breath held too long. And on the shelf, a book she didn't remember packing. Where the wild things are, but every page was torn. All except the last. The drawing was of a small boy in a crown, standing alone. But someone had scribbled in red across the bottom. He took them first. She staggered back, hand against the wall. The same scribble, the same pressure. Not hers. She grabbed the book and flung it across the room. The window fogged suddenly. No wind. No reason. She moved closer. And in the condensation, HANDPRIN small delicate familiar. She whispered, "Eva?" The handprint faded. And in its place, a fingerprint smear dragged downward, as if being pulled away. Backstory drip. Once, after the fire, they'd told her the bodies were too damaged to identify by sight. They'd used dental records. She'd never asked to see the files. Never demanded to hold what was left, because deep down, some part of her had known. She stepped back from the glass and underfoot paper. She bent, lifted it. Another note. This one folded 3 times, tucked. Under the door. He knew what fire would take. But he didn't expect who'd survive it. She turned toward the stairs and remembered. Something else. The way he used to whisper before bed. Not "I love you, but you owe me a family." His love had always been the kind that kept receipts. She walked to the cedar chest again. Dug through until her hands closed around the scorched velvet box, the one she hadn't dared open since the trial. She snapped it open. Inside, 2 things, the melted locket and a small USB drive, labeled only with one word. Gone. She blinked. She didn't remember labeling it. Didn't remember packing it. But she plugged it in. One file, a video, grainy, flickering, her old kitchen, the night of the fire. The camera had been hidden behind the spice rack. He appeared first, standing near the table, watching the kids sleep on the couch. She appeared next, carrying a basket of laundry. He said something she couldn't hear. She turned. They argued, her arms waving. His face still. Then she left the room, and he walked toward the curtain, lit a match. Paused. And then he put the match out. Not with his hand. With his tongue. Then turned, walked out. The fire had started minutes later, but not from him. Not directly. The candle had tipped. The one she lit. But the match hadn't gone out clean. It had smoldered, dropped in the waste bin. Paper inside. It had been both of them. Both too angry to see the kid sleeping 10 feet away. Both too proud to check twice. She stared at the screen, hand trembling. And for a moment, just a moment, she wondered if that was the lesson. Not betrayal, but negligence dressed in grief. Still, he'd hidden the tape. He'd labeled it gone. Not lost, not accident. Gone. He knew what she didn't, and worse, he let her carry all of it. She closed the laptop. And looked back at the melted locket. One side said stay, the other charred. Unreadable. Her hands closed around it. Outside, snow had stopped falling. Silence filled the room like rising smoke. But someone somewhere was waking up the ashes. She thought she buried the past, but someone is digging it up for her. Behind her, the handprint on the window reappeared. But this time, it was hers, from the inside. Grief isn't quiet, it crawls through walls. The sound came first, low and tremoring, like someone exhaling inside the drywall. She paused mid-step, the spoon halfway to her mouth. Oatmeal cooled, uneaten. The static from the baby monitor, tucked deep in a drawer for years, spilled through the house like breath. She didn't own a baby monitor anymore. Not since the fire. She moved slowly, afraid of making it real. The drawer in the hall was already cracked open. A flicker of static again. Then Mommy? The voice didn't echo. It lived. Soft, unsure. Not a question so much as a remembering. Her spine pulled tight. That voice didn't belong to anyone. Living. She unplugged the monitor, placed it on the windowsill, and stared at the outlet like it might apologize. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, something older. Recognition. She told herself it could be a neighbor's device crossing signals. Told herself a lot of things. But the metallic taste returned to her mouth, sharp and sudden like biting. Foil. It was always there when something wasn't right. The first night, she ignored it. The second, the voice said her name. The third, she installed cameras. The motion sensor tripped at 2:13 a.m., but the feed showed nothing but snow falling upward. She couldn't sleep after that. Each night, her body stiffened at 2:12. Each second after, a countdown. She started whispering the numbers aloud, just to prove they belonged to her. 2, 1, silence. Then static. The footage sat untouched until morning. She didn't want to look. But by then, it was obsession. She pressed play. The cabin's side window fixed camera angle, black and white, 2 hours 12 minutes and 54 seconds. Still, 2 hours 13 minutes and 1 second. Movement, barefoot child, small, pale legs, knees muddy. A cotton nightshirt clinging to sharp shoulders. No face visible. The child pressed their hands against the glass. 5 red prints bloomed slowly. Not smeared. Pressed. The child turned its head. Then flickered. Gone. She paused it, rewound, slower. The hands were bloody. The glass didn't break. But in the daylight, she checked the window. Nothing. No prints. No smudge. No proof. She scrubbed the glass anyway. Scrubbed it harder than needed. The prints weren't real, but the smell was. That same burnt metal scent from the hospital room. After they told her they'd done all they could. Backstory drip. She hadn't cried that night. Just stared at the doctor's collar, where the thread had unraveled. She never mended it. Never. Spoke of the scream she didn't let out. The next night, she sat awake with a mug of tea going cold. Camera feed open. Nothing. 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 2:13. This time, the child waved. Just once. Like it knew her. Like it forgave her. She flinched. Her cup hit the floor. Shattered. In the playback, the child left something on the window. WSILL. A smear that resembled a heart. Crude. Crooked. Made with fingers. She checked the sill. Dry. She didn't cry. Not yet. Just cleaned again. Poured bleach until her throat burned. Then she dug out the melted locket from the cedar chest. It hadn't left her side since she found it. The chain had fused into a knot, impossible to untangle. The photo inside warped, her daughter's face, half erased. By heat. The more she stared at it, the more it seemed to change. Was it a smile? Or was it a scream? She placed the locket beside her bed, facing upward, like a question. That night, she didn't sleep. At 2:13, the monitor crackled again. This time, a whisper behind the voice. A man's, softer, older, familiar. Her hand shook. She played it back, slowed it. Mommy? Pause. Then, he's watching again. She stepped back from the monitor, heart choking her. Lungs. The voice wasn't the child's. Not just the child's. Another. Presence. She went outside at dawn, traced her steps to the spot under the window. The snow had melted unevenly there, forming the vague shape of two bare feet. Too small. Too real. She reached for her phone. Called no one. Instead, she watched the footage again and again until the pause between 2 hours 13 minutes and 6 seconds and 2 hours 13 minutes and 9 seconds. Just 3 seconds. But enough to see it. In the background, through the reflection, another figure. Taller. Standing in the trees. Head tilted. Unmoving. G. She paused it there. Zoomed. Blurry. She knew the way the shoulders slouched, knew that posture, knew that guilt. Figure stepped forward and vanished in the next frame. She whispered his name. Once, then erased it. He'd died in the fire. Too, hadn't he? She opened the drawer with the monitor again, buried beneath the wires. A slip of paper. She hadn't placed it there. I'm sorry for what I let happen. Her breath caught. It wasn't her handwriting, and it wasn't his either, but it was familiar. It was their son's. She sat down hard. They told her both children died instantly. No burns on their arms. No smoke in their lungs. Peaceful. She clung to that lie like a shield. But what if it wasn't true? What if peace had come later? Too late? What if he let it happen? The guilt bloomed. An ache in her spine. She pulled the USB from the cedar chest. Plugged it into the laptop again. Same file. Same footage. This time. She listened for background sounds. Static. Faint dragging. Then a voice. He promised to keep them safe. The voice wasn't hers. Wasn't his. A child's voice. Steady, cold, like someone who knew better now. Like someone who forgave but never forgot. She closed the laptop. And pressed her forehead to the glass where the handprints had been. I'm sorry, she whispered. To who? She wasn't sure. To the child who waved? To the one who warned? To herself? She remembered. The last Christmas. The way he looked at her when the children laughed too loud. Like joy was something stolen from him. She remembered how he once unplugged the monitor, claimed it was faulty. But she heard the cries anyway, knew what he was doing when the door was closed. Still, she stayed. Still, she let him tuck them in. Pride made her silent. Fear made her small. But grief made her listen now. She reviewed the footage again. 2:13 exactly, this time. She didn't blink. The child pressed their hand to the glass. The taller figure behind him leaned in and whispered something. She played it 5 times. The final frame caught the shape of the mouth forming one word. Soon. She thought it was over. But the boy isn't alone. The locket on the nightstand clicked open on its own. What's more haunting than a child's eyes? Their silence. She hadn't dreamed in weeks. Just flashes, hands in smoke. A ribbon tied too tight. His voice saying, don't wake them yet. They're better off asleep. Tonight, she woke gasping again. Hand clutched to her chest as if her body no longer trusted breath to return on its own. The bedroom was too still, the way a room feels just after someone has left. She sat up slowly. The air had weight. Not heaviness, expectation. Her feet hit the floorboards, and the chill climbed up her legs like a warning. In the hallway, 1 light flickered above the attic pull rope. Again, 2:13 a.m. Always that time. Always just before something returned. She didn't speak aloud anymore. Words only invited company. The hallway led to the living room, where snow pressed soft against the windows, moonlight pooling like spilled milk. She turned toward the kitchen but stopped. The monitor was on again. She hadn't plugged it in. A single voice murmured from the speaker. "They're watching from underneath." She pulled the plug. The static remained. She pressed her fingers to her temples, tried to will herself still. But her hands trembled, her chest tight. The panic was coming again. She whispered the count. 5, 4, 3, 2. But memory didn't listen to numbers. The floor. Years ago. Her knees on hardwood, splinters in her palms, her daughter's shoe half buried beneath the radiator. Her husband's voice somewhere overhead, laughing like nothing had happened. She remembered thinking, she was just here. She wasn't. The fireplace flickered to life without warning, the scent of singed pine. Not the scent of the house now, but then, the old life. The one before fire made memory sharp. She moved toward the flame and saw it. On the mantel, her daughter's ribbon. Red, slightly frayed at one end. Still tied in the crooked loop. Her small fingers had never quite mastered. She hadn't brought it here. She hadn't seen it since the fire. The silence roared. She picked it up, and the warmth of it startled her. Beneath it, tucked into the crack of the wood, was a memory card. She turned it over in her fingers. Black, standard, unlabeled, clean, except for one small fingerprint, pressed faintly along the corner, not hers. She carried it to the bedroom, plugged it into the laptop. Watched the screen wake like something. Reluctant, one file. Unnamed. She clicked play. Static, darkness. Then shapes, two of them, one small, one taller. The child moved first, slow and swaying, like sleepwalking. The taller one stood back, just far enough that only their hand caught the light. A ring glinted, her breath caught. The wedding band. Her chest rose, refused to fall. She paused the video, rewound, slowed. The ring was unmistakable. Thick silver, with the faint dent where he'd once slammed it into a doorframe during a fight. She had it. It was supposed to be in the drawer. She opened the drawer. It was gone. The child in the footage stepped forward, stopped, stared at something off screen, then turned to the taller figure and held out something small. A ribbon. Red. The taller figure took it. And the screen went black. She leaned back in her chair. The heat behind her eyes returned. But no tears came. Instead, the cold spread. From her feet up, she stood. The floor creaked differently now. Lower, hollow. She moved the rug. Knelt. Pressed her fingers to the seam she hadn't noticed before. Crawl space door. She pulled it open. Dust curled up like breath held for too long. Inside. Darkness. And a rope ladder. She hesitated, then climbed. Her boots hit dirt. A narrow tunnel. The walls were too close. The air damp. She moved forward on instinct, one hand grazing the earth. Something brushed her ankle. Soft, damp. A stuffed animal. Scorched, missing one eye. She knelt, touched it, recognized it. The toy bunny from her daughter's first birthday. She hadn't seen it since that night. The further she walked, the more objects appeared. Items she thought destroyed. A burned photo frame, her son's mitten. A plastic teacup with her name scratched on the bottom. These weren't lost. They were kept. Someone had taken them, collected them. At the end of the tunnel, a shelf. On it, a box. She opened it. Inside, several memory cards, all numbered, some dated. She pulled the most recent, plugged it into the small camcorder nearby. The screen flickered to life. She expected more. Shadows. But this time, it was her. Sleeping. In this house. From the angle, the camera had to be beneath the floorboards. The footage continued. Her body turned once. The blanket rose with her breath, then paused. A small hand entered the frame, laid the red ribbon on her pillow, then vanished. She dropped the camera. Footsteps echoed. Overhead. She froze. Waited. Nothing. Then another sound. Breathing. Just behind her. She turned. Nothing but the stuffed bunny. Fallen to the floor. She climbed back out, closed the hatch, replaced the rug. Sat on the bed, ribbon in hand. And remembered. The night before the fire, she had threatened to leave. He hadn't yelled. He'd just smiled. Sighed. If you leave, I won't stop you. But you'll lose more than me. She thought it was pride. Now she wasn't so sure. She reached for the laptop. The file had updated. Same video, but new text burned into the top of the screen. They're safer. Without you. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. And in the silence, the ribbon in her lap curled slightly. As if someone had just let go. They told her she imagined them. She proved she didn't. She'd left the police station with more silence than answers. The officer's eyes hadn't even met hers when he said, "There's no evidence your children ever survived the fire." But that wasn't true. Not anymore. The drawings, the red ribbon, the locket, the footage. Still, the only box they'd checked. Beside her name was unstable. She parked 3 blocks from her sister's house and walked the rest of the way. The wind carried something bitter, mulch and old smoke, and the houses all looked too quiet. Plastic flamingos, wind chimes, torn. Porch swings. Lives pretending not to be haunted. The gate creaked like it remembered her. She didn't knock. Just opened the door. Her sister, Lena, was already in the kitchen, stirring something thick and red in a pot that smelled like cinnamon and resentment. "I figured you'd come." Lena's voice hadn't changed. Still raspy from years of smoke. Brakes on the back porch, still full of something sharp. "I need to ask you something," she said, already knowing she wouldn't get a clean answer. Lena didn't look up. "You mean ask me to believe you?" There it was. The line they always drew between memory and madness. "I have proof," she said quietly. "No," Lena replied. "You have pain." Not the same thing. A photograph sat face down on the windowsill. She could see the edge of her daughter's handwriting peeking out. She reached for it. Lena didn't stop her. It was a birthday card. A childish scrawl. To Aunt Lena. "Love Eva." But the date in the corner, 3 years after the fire. She stared at it. "Where did you get this?" Lena finally met her eyes. "Someone left it in my mailbox. No return address." Her fingers curled around the card like it might run. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lena shrugged. "Because you were already halfway buried. I didn't want to finish the job." Outside, a car door slammed. Distant. Unimportant. But she flinched. "Anyway, the kitchen smelled like burnt sugar now. Do you think I'm crazy?" she asked. Lena's hand tightened on the wooden spoon. "You're not crazy." Pause. "You're just our mother's daughter." And with that, the air shifted. The ghosts behind the words came forward. The bruises they never named. The way their mother used to hum when she was angry. Low and tuneless, like a lullaby turned against itself. She walked toward the hallway. Lena didn't stop her. The house still held the shape of childhood, the crooked frame above the staircase, the dent in the wall where she'd thrown the brush, the scratched-up door with the loose hinge. She paused at the mirror. There, at the edge, her old lipstick, red, faded, still pressed in a kiss shape like she'd dared to believe something beautiful. "I didn't imagine them," she said more to the walls than to her sister. "I know," Lena whispered behind her. "You were just easier to silence." The hallway light flickered, though there was no wind, no surge. She turned. Lena stood in the doorway. "He hurt me too," Lena said. "Before you. When you were still little." The silence between them ripened. "He made us lie," she said, "until we forgot it was a lie." Their mother had called it discipline. Their father had called it love. Her husband had called it protection. All the same word, said with different scars. Lena stepped closer. In her hand a small flash drive. "He gave this to me before he died." She stared. "Who?" Lena's mouth twisted. "Your husband." "That's not possible." I know what they said. But I know what I saw." She took the flash drive. Cold, Light, he said. He didn't want the kids to remember you the way you were. What does that mean? Lena looked away. I didn't ask. She plugged the drive into the laptop. On the hallway table, the screen woke, flickering. One video. A room. Bare. White walls. Two children. Sitting quietly. Drawing. The camera zoomed slightly. Her daughter. Her son, older. 5 years older. Eva had a scar beneath her chin now. Danny had. Glasses. They looked calm. But distant. Their eyes unfocused. A man's voice spoke from off-screen. Who do you see in this picture? A photo was held up her, smiling. Neither child reacted. Eva tilted her head. Is that the nice lady from the library? Her throat. Close. Danny laughed. No, that's no one. We don't know her. She dropped the laptop. Lena caught it before it hit the floor. She sank to the hallway rug. He took them, she whispered. Lena knelt beside her. He took everything. I thought they were dead. He wanted you to believe that. But why? Lena hesitated. Because dead children don't remember. Living ones might. The words cut so deep she couldn't breathe. She remembered the way he'd smiled in court. Calm. Sorrowful. But never scared. He wasn't mourning. He was waiting. Backstory drip. Once, he'd told her, you're a good mom, but you're too loud. Kids need quiet. She had laughed. He hadn't. Lena pressed something into her hand. A scrap of paper. Torn. A number scribbled on it. I think that's the facility. Facility. As if love could be managed in buildings. She folded the paper into the pocket of her coat, then noticed something on the wall. A framed photo of her and Lena. They were children, holding each other's hands, but the background blurred. Someone had drawn black pen over the face of the man standing behind them. She looked at Lena. You don't forget. No, Lena said. But they do. She stood, walked toward the front door. Her feet felt heavy. The flash drive now warm in her coat. Outside, the wind was rising. She turned once more to Lena. Will they remember me? Lena's eyes softened. That's what you're afraid of, isn't it? She nodded. Because if they didn't, then the fire hadn't just taken them. It had taken her. Lena stepped forward, touched her face. They're alive, she said softly. But they don't remember you. Every house hides a room that's still screaming. It started with the draft. A cold exhale from a hallway that should have ended. The cabin's blueprints showed 4 rooms upstairs. She counted 5 doors. She told herself it was a linen closet. A quirk of old architecture. But the doorknob was antique brass, worn only at the center. The kind that turned smooth when gripped too long by someone with secrets. The key was missing. Or hidden, or never existed. That night, she dreamed of her daughter holding a ring of keys, each one too large for her small fists. She kept trying them all, weeping, whispering, I have to get back to her. She woke with the taste of metal in her mouth. By morning, the snow had buried the stairs to the porch. She didn't care. She was already inside. The lock resisted until it didn't. A half-inch flathead, twisted at just the right angle, popped it. She stared at the knob as it turned, waiting for something to stop her. Nothing did. The door opened on breath. Dust and something else, the smell of markers, forgotten fruit, mildew, and time left behind. The room had no windows, no light. Just walls covered in paper, drawings, hundreds. One page fluttered loose and landed at her feet. It showed a man with no face, leading 2 children into the woods. She stepped inside slowly, afraid the air might remember her. The drawings were crude, but unmistakable. Her daughter's scrawl hearts over eyes, sun in the corner. Her son's tighter hand, always darker, angrier. One showed the cabin from the outside, smoke in the sky. Another showed her. But her face had been scratched out violently, lines cutting into the drywall beneath. There was a pile of stuffed animals in one corner, all water damaged, singed, She recognized Ava's favorite lamb, its button eye gone. Its ribbons soaked and hardened with something she didn't want to identify. She reached for it, but her hand trembled too much. She picked up a different drawing. Instead, it was of a woman holding hands with two children. A house in the background. The house was crossed out, on the back in faint pencil. She used to sing. He says she doesn't anymore. She folded it. Slipped it into her coat. In the corner, a chest, inside notebooks. Videotapes. A cracked baby monitor. The notebooks were mostly empty. Except one. Her daughter's handwriting again. Only now older, sharper, like someone who had learned not to be soft. Entry after entry. He says you stopped looking. He says we were the price. He brings things to make us forget. Then, I don't believe him anymore. She closed the notebook with shaking hands. The next entry was in red crayon, angry and jagged. He says your name like it's a curse. But I remember. You smelled like rosemary. She dropped the notebook. It fell open to a page half torn. I drew you again, just in case. Her knees folded. She knelt on the cold floor, heart hammering. There, tacked behind the chest, a final drawing. Her daughter, alone in the woods, eyes too wide. A shadow behind her. The cabin in the distance, windows blacked out. She pulled it free, the tape tearing wood with it. On the back, he says you're dead. The air thinned. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. She looked again at the drawing. Her daughter's arms were outstretched, but not reaching for help. Pointing. To something behind the viewer. To someone still watching. To save them, she must become someone she swore she'd never be. He lived in the kind of motel that didn't ask questions. Peeling blue paint. A broken vending machine humming like it mourned something. Room 8, end of the lot, just past the flickering exit sign. She stood outside for a long time, watching the light above the door stutter like it was trying to warn her. She didn't knock. She opened the door. He was already sitting on the bed, one boot off, one on, like he couldn't decide whether to run or stay. The television was muted, playing old cartoons. He looked thinner. Greasy hair, tired eyes, but no guilt, only caution. You look good, he said, like it wasn't a lie. You always wore rage well. She didn't answer, only sat. The chair scraped the floor louder than she intended. She placed the melted locket on the table between them. His face twitched, just once. They were in that house, she said quietly. You said they died. You believed me, he said, shrugging. That's on you. Her fingers curled into the edge of the seat. I buried ashes. Yeah, he said, smiling faintly. But not theirs. The silence swallowed the room. A cockroach crawled from under the TV and disappeared behind the curtain. She didn't flinch. He did. They're alive, she whispered. He leaned forward. I didn't kill them. I know. He looked surprised. I watched the tapes. She said, the ones you made. The ones where they don't recognize me. That finally made his shoulders sag. He reached into the drawer and pulled out something small. A photo. He laid it down like a confession. 2 children. A girl, hair longer now. A boy with a stitched brow. Standing stiff in uniforms, not smiling. Not crying either. You shouldn't have come here, he said, but she already had. He lit a cigarette with fingers that shook just once. It was supposed to be temporary. She waited. The debt wasn't going away, he said. And your mother, she never taught us how to survive. Just how to pretend. She didn't speak. Let him keep going. He laughed once, sharp, empty. The first time I met them, he said, they didn't even ask their names, just age, height, allergy info. She blinked. You sold them. No, he said. I traded them. She stood. He didn't stop her. 3 nights, he said. She froze. They're moving them. Facility change. Too much risk now. You being here, it messes everything up. She turned slowly. He blew out smoke. You think I didn't miss them? I watched every birthday on tape. I memorized the lullaby you used to sing. Her voice cracked. Why? Because I thought it was the only part of you that was still. Kind. The room shrank. He picked up the locket, turned it once, pressed it to his palm. They cry for you, he said. Then why lie? Because I was afraid they'd forgive you before they forgave me. She stepped forward. He let her. I should kill you. He nodded. You won't. She stared at him. Why not? Because then you'd be like me. She took the photo from the table and walked to the door. His voice stopped her. You can't go through legal channels. Not now. They'll move faster than you can. I'm not going through legal. She took a thumb drive from her pocket and slid it into the ashtray. Everything you've said, recorded, time-stamped. His jaw tightened. She turned the doorknob. I'll burn it all down if I have to. He smiled faintly. That's the woman I married. She didn't look. Back, outside, the air felt colder. But her hands didn't shake. She sat in the car. On the dashboard, her son's old toy truck. She'd found it buried behind the crawlspace wall, still intact. Still his. She turned it over in her palm. The wheels still spun. Backstory drip. Once, when he was 2, he'd cried because she'd forgotten to make the truck honk before bedtime. She'd kissed it, honk, and he'd slept. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She answered. No. Voice. Just breathing. Then a child's whisper. Mom? She froze. Eva? Click. Silence. She screamed. Shoved the phone into the console. Sat still until the sun began to rise. When she looked at the toy truck again, she noticed something etched in the plastic. I date. This Friday. 3 days from now. She blinked. Heart pounding. She hadn't carved that. She started the engine. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching from the motel roof the whole time, recording her. And what she'd forgotten was that this was the anniversary of the night she first tried to leave him. She drove east, toward a name she'd never dared say aloud. The place he'd called Sanctuary, where lost children went to disappear. She wouldn't knock. She'd burn the door down if she had to. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. And now she only has 3 nights to bring them home. The forest keeps their secrets in its roots. Before the fire, he used to braid Ava's hair with pine needles and tell her trees could talk. If you pressed your ear to the bark and promised not to tell what you heard. She had believed him. She had believed everything back then. Now, the trees said nothing. The snowstorm had swallowed the path behind her. Every step forward was a vow she couldn't take back. Ember moved beside her, nose low, tail twitching like a wire held taut. Somewhere beyond the dark, her children were breathing without her, laughing without her, forgetting her. She clenched the toy truck tighter in her coat pocket. The wheels still spun. The pines opened to a clearing, too round, too clean. A house sat in the center like it had been waiting. Green paint peeling, light in one upstairs window, and a porch that creaked even without footsteps. A curtain twitched. Her heart pulled once, violently. Ember stopped, let out one soft bark. The front door opened. A woman stepped out, her breath fogging around her like a halo. She didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to be surprised. You made it, the woman said. The voice was familiar in a way that made her sick. She didn't answer, only stared past her, through the shadows of the doorway. A flicker of movement. Eva. Then Daniel. Older, paler, eyes guarded. They stopped just behind the glass, watching. Eva tilted her head, uncertain. Then she turned to the woman, buried herself in her side. Mom, she said. It broke something permanent. The toy truck in her pocket began to rattle against her ribs. With every thud of her pulse, she stepped forward. They're mine, she said. The woman held her ground. Not anymore. The wind howled like it was siding with someone. They were taken from me. The woman's smile faltered. Maybe, but I picked up the pieces. They're not yours. They don't know you. Silence stretched between them, sticky with implication. Inside the house, Daniel pressed his hand to the window. The same hand she used to kiss when he scraped his knuckles on the swing set. Now it trembled for someone else's approval. You drugged them, she said. Quieter. Or he did. You fed them lies. I fed them dinner, the woman replied. Every night, I rocked Eva through night terrors. I cleaned blood off Daniel's sheets when he started waking up screaming. Where were you? The question lodged somewhere beneath her collarbone. I didn't stop looking. No, but you stopped being enough. The air changed. The trees seemed to lean closer, hungry for the ending. Do they remember the fire? She asked. The woman hesitated. Then, only when they dream. A pause. Daniel asks me if hell smells like smoke. A leaf cracked under Ember's paw. She took out the photo, the one from the motel, the proof. Held it up like it could pierce glass, like it could reach memory. He made them forget me. She whispered. The woman stepped closer. Not forget. She said, replace. Her throat closed. He taught them not to cry, the woman added. I taught them it was safe to. Something in her rebelled. Pride twisted into smallness. Righteousness soured to doubt. I sang to them, she said, reaching. Every night, lavender and rosemary. Eva used to braid grass and call it magic. And now she builds puzzles in silence, the woman said. Because sometimes survival means unlearning your mother's voice. She closed her eyes. Backstory drip. The night of the fire, he told her to go get medicine. When she returned, the upstairs was in flames. The children were gone. And no one believed she hadn't said it herself. She swallowed the memory like poison. You knew they weren't yours. I knew they needed someone. Someone isn't a mother. Behind the woman, Eva opened the door. Just a crack. Just enough. Her hand trembled on the frame. Daniel hovered behind her. Eyes locked on the photo still clutched in her fingers. He spoke first. That's my truck. The woman turned, startled. He stepped forward. You said it burned. I found it, she said, voice breaking. Hidden behind the old crawl space. You used to honk it 3 times before bedtime. His lip twitched. Memory tugged. Eva touched his arm, gently, like she didn't want to believe what her hand was telling her. The woman's smile returned, but it was smaller now. Cracked at the edges. I gave them peace, she said. You'll bring war. I'll bring truth. They'll hate you for it. Maybe, but they deserve to choose what they remember. The wind shifted. The woman blinked, just once, and in that blink, fear. Real, raw, childlike. The kind that only comes from knowing what it feels like to be abandoned and loved by accident. You think they'll walk away from this? She asked. From me? No, she said. I think they'll walk toward the truth. She didn't wait for permission. She held out the truck. Daniel stepped outside. Eva followed. Ember whined, tail thumping softly. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, mug trembling in her hands. You don't know what comes next, she sighed, almost pleading. No, she replied. But I'll be the one walking beside them when it does. Daniel reached out. Took the truck. The feel of it in his hand pulled something real back to the surface. I remember, he said softly. His sister looked up at her. What's your name? She asked. It gutted her. She whispered it anyway. They didn't repeat it, but they didn't run. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. To them, she's the stranger trying to break in. But tomorrow, they'll ask why she never stopped knocking. Some fires destroy, others cleanse. The first time she ran into a burning house, it was instinct. This time, it was choice. The match was still in her pocket. Nestled beside the photo. Daniel didn't know he'd drawn the one where the house wasn't on fire yet, just waiting. She could still hear the echo of his voice from last night, just before the door had closed. Will you come back for us? She had. Snow melted beneath her boots as she stepped into the clearing again. The cabin sat heavy in the dark, shuttered against the wind. But light flickered in the basement window, a red glow that didn't come from any lamp. Ember stayed behind, pacing, whining softly, as if the forest itself knew this would be the last time this house stood. She opened the door without knocking. Let the hinges creak like a warning. Inside, silence until the hum, a low, electric buzz from the baby monitor still mounted above the fireplace. Static murmuring like a voice that had lost its words. A child's drawing had been taped over the family portrait, Daniel's again. This time, the woman in the middle had no eyes. She followed the sound down the hallway. Each step took her past something forgotten. A toothbrush still wet. A pair of mittens too small for Ava's hands now. A teacup with lipstick her shade. Not the other woman's, downstairs. The basement door stood open. She descended into the red. The heater's pilot light flickered in the corner. A gas can sat beside it, open. Half-drained. The caretaker stood in the middle of the room, not afraid, not surprised. You shouldn't be here, she said. Voice calm. She looked thinner in the firelight, older. Her hands clutched a small necklace, Ava's locket. Melted at the hinge, still smeared with soot from the original fire. I didn't come to fight, she said. Then you shouldn't have brought matches. The woman's eyes were glassy, red at the edges, sleepless, raw. They're upstairs, she said. She blinked. Sleeping. They still believe I'll make pancakes tomorrow. You won't, the caretaker nodded. Just once, I know. Silence. She stepped forward. You loved them, she said. It wasn't a question. I still do. Then why keep them from me? Because they were mine longer than they were yours. The heat thickened. The locket glinted like a wound. You knew I was coming. The woman looked away. I saw it in his eyes when he left, that he'd lit a fuse he couldn't stop. I just didn't think you'd survive it. You did. No, she said quietly. I endured it. She turned to the shelves lined with notebooks, more drawings, more documentation of stolen time. I taught Daniel to tie his shoes. I held Ava through the nightmares your name gave. Her. My name? She snapped. Or his lies? Both, the woman whispered. It doesn't matter. You became the ghost. I became the pillow. She wanted to rage, to scream. But she just stepped closer. What do they know about me? That. You died. And that dying sometimes looks like walking away. The locket swung in her hand like a pendulum. I didn't die. But you weren't there. The words cut, simple as breath. She reached into her coat and pulled out the toy truck again. Daniel's, the one that still held the fingerprint. Smudge's, the one that didn't burn. I came back. The woman looked at it like it was proof of something she didn't want to believe. They'll be confused, she said. Hurt. They'll be free. Will they? The woman stepped back toward the heater. Flame danced behind her eyes now. I can make it quick. No, she said, stepping between her and the flame. You don't get to end this like that. I wasn't going to light it. A beat. I was going to warm my hands. Silence. She took the locket from her. The woman didn't resist. I kept it, she said. I didn't know why. Because some fires don't end what they start. They just wait. Footsteps above. A creak. A voice. Mom? Ava. The sound of her daughter's voice stripped something raw from her bones. She turned to the stairs. Come here, she called, gently. It's time. Daniel appeared too, rubbing his eyes. They froze when they saw her. No recognition. Just the same tension from yesterday. Then Eva stepped down one stair. I dreamed about you, she said. You did? She nodded. You were crying. She crouched. I was. Daniel clutched his sister's hand. But you're not anymore. No, she said. I'm not. They came to her slowly, like deer approaching the ghost of a memory. She opened her arms. didn't demand. Just waited. Eva reached first. Then Daniel. They folded into her like pages that still remembered where they belonged. Upstairs, the wind slammed against the windows. Outside, Ember barked twice. Urgent. She stood. We have to go. The woman didn't follow. She just stood in the basement doorway, watching. They'll hate me, she said. No, she said softly. They'll forget you. She turned to leave. But the woman called out, voice cracking. I was trying to undo what someone else did. She paused. I know. Then she took the children by the hand and ran. The matchbox in her pocket was gone. The fire didn't start until they reached the trees. A bloom of orange, slow and reluctant, like the house had waited for permission to let go. The children didn't look back, but she did, just once, and saw the woman standing in the upper window, locket still in hand, mouth open in a prayer. No one could hear. Behind the flames, a shadow moved deeper than the fire, someone not inside, but circling the edge of the woods. They didn't stop running. Not until the sun began to rise. Not until the snow turned gold. If justice still matters, you'll want. The next page, she held them both as the forest exhaled smoke and silence, and the little boy whispered in her ear, He's still coming for us. Healing begins where denial ends. She used to flinch when they said her name in the courtroom, like it belonged to someone else, a monster the reports described in passive voice. The mother was seen. The mother failed to. The mother may have been unstable. But today, she held the name like it was a photograph she'd finally washed clean. Daniel sat beside her, feet swinging, hands curled into sleeves. Ava clutched a notebook, pages full of crooked lines and shaded in silences. They'd stopped calling her the lady who took us 3 weeks ago. Now they just said, our mother, careful, like testing glass for cracks. The judge flipped through the file without looking up. Paper sounded like betrayal when handled too quickly. She had no makeup on today. No armor. Just a scarf her daughter had once braided around her wrist during supervised visits. It had come undone halfway through and trailed behind her like a leash. She wore it anyway. Behind her, the woman sat. Not the social worker. Not the attorney. The caretaker. The stranger who sang lullabies she hadn't earned. She was quiet now. Wrung out, paler, thin lips pressed flat as if trying to keep a memory from leaking. Her attorney leaned in. Don't speak unless asked, and don't cry, she nodded. But her hands were already shaking. Flashback, at 12. She sat on her own mother's lap, holding a wet rag to the bruise on her cheek. Her mother whispered, we don't talk about what love costs. That was the first lesson she promised never to pass down. The judge asked Eva a question, something gentle. Eva answered with a nod. Then, unprompted, she pulled the notebook into her lap and opened it to a sketch, 3 figures holding hands, one with a missing face. I remember, Eva said. A pause. I remember the songs. But I remember the smoke too. The judge looked at her. Not the drawing. She couldn't breathe. Daniel stood up and pointed. That's her, he said. She was on fire, but she still came for us. The courtroom held its breath. The therapist testified next. Calm, practiced, eyes soft. The children are regaining memory through safety, not suggestion. That distinction matters. But the trauma? The opposing counsel asked. The therapist nodded. It remains. But now it has a name. Silence. Then the woman spoke, uninvited. I never lied to them, she said. I gave them routine. I gave them warmth. You call it kidnapping, I call it saving. The judge didn't respond, but her children looked at her. And for the first time, didn't look away. Outside, the hallway smelled like old wood and coffee. She crouched in front of them, unzipping their coats with hands that remembered each thread, each stain. Daniel pulled something from his pocket. The toy truck. Scuffed, silent. Do you want it back? He asked. She shook her head. No, it's yours, but you kept it safe. He nodded like that made sense. But what the judge didn't know was that Eva had drawn something else last night, an image she hadn't shown anyone. A shadow behind her father's smile. A man with no hands. They went to the river that afternoon, just the three of them. Not to speak, just to breathe. She held Ava's hand as she stepped onto the rocks. Daniel threw pebbles and counted the ripples. Aloud, his voice louder each time, braver. He used to say I was too loud, he said suddenly. She looked over. I like your voice, she said. He smiled. Pride began to root where suspicion had lived. At night, she sat at her vanity. No one called it her sanity hearing anymore, but the word lingered in her mouth like metal. She wiped off the day's exhaustion, touched the scar behind her ear, the one he gave her with a thrown plate. She hadn't looked at it in years. Now it looked back like a warning that had failed to keep her safe. The mirror's edge was cracked, barely visible, but when she leaned in, her face split in two. She stayed like that, watching both versions of herself, the mother who didn't run, the woman who returned too late, and the girl who once swore she'd break the cycle. She reached into the drawer, pulled out the USB drive, the one she hadn't shown the court yet. Footage he didn't know she'd saved. Recordings from the baby monitor. The way he'd spoken through the walls. The threats muttered like bedtime stories. She'd let the system believe she was unstable because she needed to be underestimated. She needed them to relax the grip before she shattered it. Tomorrow, she'd bring it in, not for vengeance, for verification. Backstory drip. Her father once told her, if you ever feel like disappearing, make sure you leave a trail so you can find yourself again. He hadn't followed his own advice, but she had. The next morning, Ava asked her what her lullaby had been. She froze, then hummed it. Off-key, halting, lavender and rosemary. Ava didn't say anything, just leaned her head against her mother's shoulder and stayed there. They didn't call it healing, but it was. She sat at the edge of the bed long after they'd fallen asleep, watching their breath, their eyelashes, their quiet. No more bolting upright in the dark. No more whispered fears of burning ceilings. Just sleep. Stillness. Freedom. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. And in the mirror, for the first time, she doesn't flinch at her own reflection. Monsters write apologies in blood, not ink. She knew the letter had arrived before the mailbox even creaked. Something in the wind shifted. The children were still upstairs, their laughter muffled by cartoons and cereal. Ember barked once and went quiet, as if even the dog knew what came next. She opened the door slow. The snow had stopped, but the weight in the sky hadn't. The envelope sat crooked in the box. No return address, no postmark. Just her name. Her real name, not the one May used in court or in custody hearings. The one he used when he whispered her down to nothing. She didn't open it right away. She put it on the kitchen table, beside the lukewarm mug she'd been sipping from since dawn. The tea had long gone bitter. She left it there. Let it accuse her with silence. Flashback. The last time he wrote her anything, it was a grocery list. She wasn't allowed to alter. He'd written milk, eggs, toothpaste in silence. She hadn't laughed. That night he'd shoved her into the pantry for speaking too loudly when Daniel spilled juice. She sat down, the letter still untouched. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. Not after the trial, not after the fire. Not after digging herself out of every story he tried to bury her in. The wax seal cracked under her thumb like brittle bone. The first line was just her name, over and over. No greeting, no warmth. Just ownership masquerading as intimacy. She read it once. Then again, slower. Each sentence felt like a blade with fingerprints. He started with regret, not apology. Regret for being misunderstood. He admitted the fire, but only after justifying it. The house needed to be wiped, he wrote. It had too much of you in it. She stared at that sentence. A long time. Like it would apologize if she just gave it time. Then came the memory he tried to force back into her mouth. Their wedding day, her hair in braids. How she trembled when he kissed her. I thought fear was just another kind of love, he wrote. And maybe it was. You were at your best when you were scared. She folded the page, set it aside. Breath through her teeth. Down the hall, she heard Eva laugh. That sound kept her anchored. She picked the letter up again. He wrote about the children. Like they were possessions he'd misplaced. I was trying to teach them strength, he said. But you kept giving them softness. Softness, he claimed, was dangerous. It breeds weakness. You make them weep over bruises I taught them to ignore. She put the letter down again. This time it stayed down longer. She looked out the window. Snowflakes hovered against the glass like moths trying to come home. Backstory drip. She once kissed a bruise on Daniel's elbow and told him pain was just the body's way of sending a message. He asked her what message his dad was trying to send. She never answered. The last page of the letter wasn't in his handwriting. Different ink. Smoother strokes. A woman's hand. It simply said, "He told me you wouldn't read to the end." She flipped the rest over. Blank. She stared at the handwriting like it might confess its own sins. One drop of wax had spilled on the final word, her name. It looked like blood, dried but unforgotten. She walked to the fireplace. Set the letter. On the logs. Lit the match with her left hand. Watched it catch. The flame took its time. Like it wanted her to see every sentence vanish. Ash curled into itself. Names blackened. Love turned gray. Only one line lingered. Burned halfway but still. Legible on the edge of a curling page. I never deserved them. Neither did you. She didn't cry, but her hand tightened on the edge of the mantel, knuckles going bone white. Behind her, Eva called out, "Mom? What's burning?" She turned around. Just something that shouldn't have survived. She swept the ashes into a tin, didn't label it, didn't keep it on a shelf. She walked outside, barefoot, the snow biting at her soles. She scattered the ashes under the pine tree, the one Daniel had once named the safe one. The wind didn't take them all. A fragment, stuck to her sleeve, blackened, weightless, but stubborn. She brushed it off. It clung. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. She went inside, locked the door, and promised herself she'd never speak of the letter again, but she dreamed of that sentence for years. Peace sounds like silence in a house once haunted. When she was 8, her father taught her to sit in the dark and listen to the house breathe. If it groans, it's remembering, he said. If it's silent, it's safe. He never explained what to do if it lied. Now, in the new house, she sat on the edge of the sofa at 2:12 a.m., barefoot, robe clutched at the throat, tea gone cold beside her. She stared at the hallway where no light flickered, where no laughter echoed in the vents, where no burnt scent clung to the drywall. This house was not haunted, and yet the silence pressed against her chest like a hand waiting to smother or soothe. She glanced toward the kids' room. The door was cracked just enough. Inside, the rhythm of their sleep was steady, Ava's soft snore, Daniel's shifting breaths. It had taken months for them to sleep without waking screaming. Weeks for them to say her name without the question at the end. The move had been sudden, not out of fear, but necessity. The old house carried echoes that refused to die. The sound of her name said like a curse, the flash of fire behind every memory. Here, in this new place, the walls were clean. No scratches, no soot stains, no history. She should have felt safe. Instead, she was waiting. The clock clicked over to 2:13, and nothing happened. No lights. No whisper through the pipes. No footsteps in the attic. She exhaled, but didn't relax. She reached beneath the cushion and pulled out the locket. Melted, warped, still stained with the soot of that first night. She couldn't wear it, couldn't throw it away. It lived there now, tucked inside the place she sat most. A quiet reminder that not all scars belonged on the body. Flashback. The night after the court gave her custody, Daniel had asked if they still had to whisper. She told him no, but he whispered anyway. Just in case, she looked out the window. The snow had started again, soft, reluctant. Ember was curled at the door, tail twitching with dream. She felt like she should cry. Instead, she sipped the cold tea and swallowed around it. In the kitchen, the drawer stuck again. She pulled harder, heard the sharp crack of the old wood yielding. Inside, batteries, tape, a USB drive wrapped in a rubber band. She hadn't touched it since the trial. She hadn't told the court everything, just enough to win. The rest sat on that drive, still glowing in the dark like an unburied match. Stared at it now. Tempted. But she didn't plug it in. Not tonight. Tonight was for quiet, for letting the dark be dark. A board creaked in the hallway. Not loudly but enough. She froze. Waited. Ember raised her head but didn't bark. Then, a whisper. Mom? Eva. She rose, moved slow, the robe trailing behind her like a shadow trying to catch up. Eva stood at the end of the hallway, fingers curled in the hem of her shirt, eyes wide but not afraid. I had a dream, she said. You were outside. Was I coming back in? You were trying to. But the door wouldn't open. Her throat clenched. I'll always come back in, she said. Eva looked at her, long and slow, then walked forward and pressed something into her hand. It was a drawing, 3 stick figures. 2, holding hands. 1 reaching through a door. I drew it before bed. Eva said. She crouched. Can I ask you something? Eva whispered. Anything. Did he love us? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the locket in her other hand, then folded the paper slowly, pressing it between her palms like prayer. I think he wanted to. Is that the same thing? No. Silence stretched. But Eva didn't. Pull away. He hurt you, she said. But you didn't leave. I should have. Why didn't you? Another silence. She stood, carried her daughter back to bed, tucked her in gently, kissed her forehead, then sat beside Daniel and traced the outline of his hand where it curled against his cheek. A part of her still searched him for scars she couldn't see. Backstory drip. The therapist once told her that trauma isn't just what happens, but what you carry forward. That healing wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without breaking. She returned to the living room. The lights stayed off. She didn't turn them on. She picked up the USB, waited, then slid it back into the drawer and shut it quietly. Not everything needed to burn to be gone. The photo album still had 1 page missing, not torn, just never filled. She would fix that tomorrow with something new, something real. She sat again. Tea cold. Skin warm, breath steady. She checked the clock one last time. 2:16. And still the lights stayed off. She whispered into the stillness. We're home.